And now for a cultural call-out. We sure don't appreciate that.
So today's cultural call-out is going to be the idea of hyper-sheltering kids. And so this kind of skews on the less structured side of membership and more towards the hyper-structured side. I think both can be just as damaging. And let me give you a story. So basically, on my mission, we were zone leaders at the time. We were in this area. One of the elders in our zone called us up and he said, "Hey, can you guys come over here real quick?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure. What's going on?" And he was like, "My companion is crying. He's curled up in a ball on the floor, just crying his eyes out. And I don't know what's wrong with him." This elder was from Ecuador. His companion was from Utah. So we run over there. It's me and my companion, Elder Jansen, who was like this big, massive football player from BYU. And so we go down to his apartment. We get into the door and we see this elder there. And we'll call him Elder Funshine because he was a Care Bear. He was like rocking back and forth, just on the floor, just sobbing uncontrollably. And I was just like, oh, man, what happened? And so Elder Jensen just immediately springs into action and is just like, "Hey, Elder, stop crying." And so, like, he's a big guy. Like, this Elder Funshine, he was, kind of a shorter guy, smaller kid. But you looked at him and he just kind of had this childlike innocence about him. And so he stops crying. He's like, now do like 20 jumping jacks. And so like he starts doing jumping jacks. And he told me later, he was just like, "Yeah, doing jumping jacks, get your body going. Like, that's going to help you regulate your emotions. It's going to help to get things going and stuff like that." And I was just like, wow. And so we were able to calm down and kind of talk with him a little bit. And we found out he wasn't allowed to watch anything above rated G before the mission.
Oh, boy.
He had like an 8 o'clock bedtime, hard curfew, and as basically as hyper sheltered as you could get, this was him. And so the third world jungles of Paraguay didn't necessarily agree with that upbringing too much, And so he he got in front of some people that definitely were not rated G. Let me just put it that way. And so he came across these people, he came across new ideas, new situations, and it was completely just overwhelming to his system, and it led him to just shut down. To his credit, though, like eventually he did, like this was his first transfer. He was struggling with the language and things like that. His companion didn't speak English. And so like there was a lot going on for him. I get that. However, I don't think that the hyper sheltering approach was necessarily helpful to him at that time. But I want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah. Yeah. Life is not rated G. Like it just really isn't. And so as soon as you get into adulthood and you like get cast out into the world, you're going to find that like it's going to shock you in many ways you didn't think you're going to be shocked. And that's coming from someone who I don't believe I was completely sheltered, maybe to a certain degree, but
yeah,
certainly not to that degree.
Well, let's talk about that real quick. Is sheltering good? Is there a place for sheltering with your kids?
Oh, 100%. I think that I absolutely agree. That's one of the reasons why I homeschool all my kids, actually, is that there are certain things that don't benefit them to be introduced in an early age. So maintaining your children's innocence as long as you can is a duty and a responsibility as a father to do. Now, my children know many swear words. They hear them in the movies we watch. We talk about them. Like they hear things and they know what bad words are. They've been exposed to lots of things because all their friends go to public school. So, they get all of that indirect exposure to things. So it's not like they're not boxed in and totally being stunted in their emotional and mental growth by being sheltered. But there's some things they just absolutely don't need to be exposed to. Right. Yeah. And that's up to the parents to kind of judge what they should be exposed to or not. But in reality, if you're going on your mission and you're having a mental collapse because you are so shocked at how the world operates, your parents failed you to a certain degree. You just didn't get outside enough. Not even that you don't have to watch R-rated movies or even PG-13 rated movies to understand how the world works, but
Yeah.
you do have to like operate in the world to a certain degree. So if you're in your house all the time, or you're just going from your public school classroom, or from your school classroom to home to church to back to home, and you're not like talking with people who believe differently from you, then you're gonna have a hard time. Like
Yeah.
I have one of my sons. He doesn't really have a filter. He's all like my mom in that way. Actually, he just says what he's thinking.
Yeah. Our mom.
And yeah, yep, our mom.
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we were at the store the other day, and we were checking out, and he has his own debit card because he has his allowance on his debit card. So
Yeah.
he gave it to the cashier, and she's like, "Oh, this is cool," because he's only 5.
Yeah.
And she swiped it for him, and it approved, and he did this like little yes thing, And then after she gives him the bag of stuff, he turns to her and says, "Did you know that God made Adam and Eve, and that He loves you? He loves everybody." And then he just walks away. It's like,
Look at that.
This is he's not a sheltered, I
Hardcore,
think
like gangster missionary right there, 5-year-old.
he's got the missionary vibe down. And the next breath, he said he told his brother that he'd skin him alive. So like he's got a good balance there of the violence and the carnal man and the spiritual going on there. So I think when it comes to like exposing yourself to the world and like getting a good knowledge of how fallen humanity is, that's not something you intentionally have to explore. That'll just come naturally as you're operating as a normal human. This guy,
it's a difficult conversation to have, like, because you can see both sides. I totally get the concern of these parents of like, hey, the world is scary, and I want to make sure that my kids are ready for it before I send them out there. Totally get that. At the same time, I kind of view it almost as like weight training, where like the only way that you're going to strengthen your muscles is kind of by breaking them down, and so it's the way that I view it is more like what I would suggest, to a lot of these members, because there are a couple of negative consequences that can come from over sheltering and hyper sheltering your kids. In general, I think it can lead to members who have these extra rules in their house that are like non-doctrinal or anything like that. It can lead to extra amounts of judgment being applied to people that aren't living those rules necessarily. And that can be damaging in itself. But for the kid, it can absolutely wreck them when they get out into the real world. And it's kind of like the Amish, how they'll send them out into the real world, and like some of them will stay out there, others will come back and they're just so shell-shocked that they're like, I don't want any of that. It's like, what I would suggest, get your kid out there, just like what you're saying. Maybe instead of like introducing a bunch of crap into your house or anything like that, just encourage your child to get involved at school. Like get them into clubs, get them into sports, put them into, have them work. I mean, we're talking about our mom. Like our mom, as soon as we were able to, we were working, we were face to face with other people. And even in Utah, we were able to find a lot of people that didn't agree with us in our lifestyle and our religion. And we were able to work side by side with these people and still kind of stay within the doctrine that our parents taught us, And we were able to see these different viewpoints. We were able to learn how other people think. And we were able to see how other viewpoints and ideologies kind of work with other people, And so it's not that we were sheltered at all, but it was nice that we were introduced to kind of the outside world while we still lived at home, so that if we did have questions, if we did have troubles, if we did have concerns, we could take those to our parents in a setting where they could then teach us. You don't want to shelter them so much that it's like they're on their own when they're outside of the house, especially on the mission. Because back then you didn't have the weekly phone calls. Back then it was just twice a year. And so he was kind of just like, I don't know if I can make this.
He's cooked. Yeah.
To his credit, though, he did. Like he put in the work. I saw him like a year later. He was fine. Like he made it through the mission. He was able to overcome that. But he did have to have that initial kind of world shattering. Like his whole world had to crumble in order to make way for the actual reality to set in a little bit. But you were going to say something.
To your previous point, like I had a friend in elementary school who we were going on a field trip. So I brought a deck of playing cards to play like war.
Right.
And he was very shocked that I brought the cards. And he said,
those are the devil's cards.
Yeah. We had and then we had this like, we had our own little council our own little religious council. Like, is it bad to use face cards? Is this of the devil? Because somebody in our group is saying it is, but I never heard that before. So am I sinning right now by holding these cards? So
Yeah.
like, if it's totally fine if you don't want your kids playing with cards because it could lead to gambling or whatever the justification was. But like at the same point, like separate that from the doctrine. Say, hey,
Yeah,
it's
get it
totally
away
fine to
from the
use
church.
cards. Yeah. Like this is a family rule. This isn't a church rule. This isn't a point of doctrine. This is a point of family culture. As long
Right.
as you separate those two things out, you can create whatever culture you want in your home to raise up good, humans that follow your culture that you as a parent has set. As long as they understand the difference between those two.
100%.
Second point, I knew an elder on my mission who was the exact same way, except he took it in stride. He was really good about it. We had a fun time after a certain like lesson in zone council or something like or district meeting where he didn't know what the word prostitute meant. So we kind of had to talk about he didn't know what a prostitute was,
Yeah.
So we had a fun little, explanation meeting when you're trying
Clearly
to be
he
as
hasn't
playful as
read the Old
possible.
Testament.
Right. And it's like, hey, this is in the Bible, so it's okay
Yeah.
to talk about on the mission. And his companion, explained it to him, and then after that, he had his very first can of Coca-Cola. Like that was like he had never had soda before. They kind of broke into. He went a little wild for a little bit, but he toned it down after that.
Yeah.
But to his credit, like he was the most driven and accomplished elder that we had. Like if you gave him something to do, he would do it, and he was the most talented and skilled in some of the things I've ever seen. So like he spent his time well, not worrying about the world. But to be kind of shell shocked like that and to introduce things on your mission is just not a great place to do that. So if you can kind of ease your way into the world a little bit and as safe as possible, that's what it should be. Your home should be a place of safety, not necessarily shelter.
Well, in the age of
should
home-centered church, it should be like a world preparation center. Like you should be preparing them not just for a mission, not just for the temple, but for their life. You should be preparing them. Like that's your goal. And the church has pretty much said like that's not their place. This is home-centered now. It's like the home is the primary battleground for that. It's the primary preparation center. No, I totally agree. And I did want to touch down on the fact that I mean, I love that differentiation you made about family rules and church rules and distinguishing those two, because I think that gets blurred a lot. And one thing that I'm seeing from like a lot of the anti-material out there are people that come out and say like, hey, the church believed, and the church said that I wasn't allowed to listen to X music, and I wasn't allowed to say these words, and I wasn't allowed to do X, Y, or Z. And it's like, those are family rules, okay? Like, those were your family's rules. They put those on you, and let's try and keep the church out of that,
Yeah, you need to talk to your mom and dad on that one, right? Like that's your parents. In all reality, like your job as a parent is to create a connection with your child, so that when they encounter the world, they can come back and get the truth from you, right? If they can feel safe enough to do that. There are a lot of things that I encountered in the world that I did not feel safe enough with my mom and dad at the moment to share. Like, what does this mean? Like, I did not want to ask my parents those things. It was just too awkward and uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So if you can bridge that gap and find out a way to build a relationship with your kids, then as they venture into the world, they'll venture while you're holding their hand. Like they'll extend out, and eventually they'll hold a rope, and eventually they'll go off on their own. So the church culture inherently kind of shifts towards that sheltering mentality, right? Like, don't sin, don't partake in evil things. Great, that's the gospel, that's the doctrine. Avoid evil as much as possible. You take that to its hyper extended, the extreme end of that, and you've been locked in the basement and you only sing primary songs.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
So the problem is like they are ignoring other pieces of doctrine where it's like, we're supposed to be in the world but not of the world, but that means we're supposed to be in it, and we're supposed to let our light so shine. So we're supposed to be like absolutely be a part of different communities. Put yourself out there, work with other people, get to know, make friends with everybody. You're not supposed to be exclusionary. You're not supposed to do anything like that. that's non-doctrinal. That's, not based in any kind of scripture that I've read. And if we are just hiding away from the world, we're becoming hermits. We're hiding our lights at that point and saying, no, the world, it's a fear-based mentality, because it's from the parents to the child. And I'm talking about when children are like maybe 16 plus. If you're keeping them inside, you're not letting them, if you're that controlling at that age, I don't know. Part of me, let me just get this out there. I mean, my oldest is 7, so I haven't had teenagers yet, but I was a teenager once. And so
you've been there before.
From the reading that I've done, it seems like you kind of want them, you kind of want to be the training wheels at that point. Like, you just kind of want them to just kind of wobble and teeter on their own, and you can be there to catch them, but you shouldn't be the one steering and pedaling the bike at that age. Like, you should let them just kind of have more autonomy as they grow, and let them make mistakes. Let them get out there. That's how we learn. That's how we grow. Like, the atonement was completely done because of mistakes. We're imperfect people. And like, the idea that we have to be perfect, and like that sin should be avoided at all costs and stuff like that. It's like, well, sometimes people learn the most after they have made a mistake. That's certainly, like, I'm a learner through experience. It's like, I learn through trial, I learn through error and stuff like that. I have a hard time sitting down, reading a book, and then saying, okay, I know everything now. Let me go out there and apply this into the world. Yeah. And so it's like, that's the way that a lot of people learn, is just through trial and error. I think you want that to happen while they still live in your house, and you just want to create that environment, like you said, where they feel comfortable enough that they can make mistakes, that they can go out there, try their hand at the world, and not like, I'm not suggesting that you put your kids out into like parties, like you're throwing them out there into like clubs or anything, it's like, no, like in nightclubs and crazy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, no, keep your kids, but encourage them to get out into the world, encourage them to be a friend and a support to everybody.
Absolutely. Yeah. You should not be shutting down at the mention of the F word emotionally, like,
right.
Like as a teenager, and going on, like, things that we classify as culturally not okay, you should be able to face up to, absorb with grace, and move forward past those things. Right. So
yeah,
that needs to change,
and approach the world with
culture.
understanding. Like, you have to understand that other people were not raised like you, and you kind of have to, and that's where the grace comes in. Like, if you hear, if you see people breaking these rules that you were raised with, like, we don't judge people if they drink coffee. If like my friend, he's not a member, he drinks coffee all the time, he smokes cigarettes and all of that kind of stuff. And he, do I judge him hardcore? Do I go over to him and I'm like, Art, you got to quit you got to cut that all out. You got to drop it. It's like, no, I don't do that, because I know that he hasn't made those promises. He hasn't made the covenants. And so why would he need to be held to that understanding? It's like, he's not a part of the religion yet, but we're good friends, Yeah.
So, well, my parents-in-law, they enjoy a good espresso every now and then. And we had a fun conversation once when we went up, and they got this new espresso machine at home. And my third boy, he came up to them and said, "Is that coffee?" I'm like, yep, this is coffee. Like, that's not good for you. Like, yeah, well, you're not supposed to drink that. And his grandparents handled it very well and said, well, some people drink it and others people don't. And, a lot of people within the culture, they're taught that, like, they're bad people because they're doing bad things. That's an easy dot to connect. But we had to sit down with our boys after that and be like, hey, we told you that we don't drink coffee, and your grandparents are drinking coffee. It doesn't mean that they're terrible people. They're choosing to live not according to what we believe is God's principles, and they're exploring a different avenue of life. Like,
and these are ex-members of the church, by the way.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, they used to be members. So in our house, this is what we do. This is the core doctrine we believe, and because we believe that, this is how we act. And not everyone has to act that way. Everyone can choose.
And I think it was helpful for you and I, at least, to have a grandpa that had left the church as well. Whenever we went over to his house, he always had coffee going, but he was respectful of our belief system. Like, he knew we were active members of the church, and he didn't try and push his lifestyle on us, and we reciprocated. It's like, hey, we kind of understood where he was at, but we loved him for who he was.
And a great credit to our dad for that, because he totally accepted he was the example that showed us how to operate with people who are navigating life contrary to our beliefs.
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I never saw my dad criticize or even stiffen at the idea of somebody else doing something that we obviously didn't believe in. So
Yeah.
when I saw our dad, interact with his dad and see the difference there was no conflict, there was no judgment. So
Right.
yeah, if you're raised with that attitude, then becomes really easy to navigate the world after that, because you're not thinking that everyone is this terrible sinful beast that you're trying to avoid.
Right. Right.
I feel like some of these like sheltered people, they go into the world looking at everyone like they're horrible zombies. Like they're just
Right.
like fallen beasts that are going to consume them if they're not careful. So
It's a very
yeah,
fear-based mentality, and it's like, yeah, that doesn't come from God. That's not a God-driven mentality. It's very fear-centered. It's like especially when the
oh
kids
yeah,
are older, it's like if you're hyper sheltering at that age, it shows that you don't really trust your kids. It shows that you don't trust people in general, and so it's
and you
like
don't trust the atonement.
you don't trust
Like
the
you have
atonement. It's
to.
like you are the morning and the evening star at that point, and that's not healthy,
Yeah,
and
that's a problem.
non-doctrinal. So big problem there.
Right.
And so for that reason, we call out that cultural complaint there, and we're going to encourage the culture to get a little better on that. Come on.
Yeah. Hey, lighten up, culture.
That's
Jeez.
right. Come on, culture.